There you go.
All right, so we'll start with our motivation. So just take a minute and connect with refuge and bodhicitta. Sangye chudam soge chunam lai jantu badudani kapsu chia dage chunyan gi pe sonam gi drola penchia sangye drupa sho sangye chudam soge chunam lai jantu badudani kapsu chia dage chunyan gi pe sonam gi drola penchia sangye drupa sho sangye chudam sogi chunam lai jantu badu dani kapsuchi dagi junyan gi pe sonam gi rola benjia sangye drupa sho. So taking a minute to connect with refuge, to connect with bodhicitta. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thanks to Shantideva Group for hosting this. I think it's a great idea to do this text at this time. So thanks for suggesting it, Sheila. The way I'm going to frame this hour and a half is kind of half hour, 45 minutes presentation with Q&A, and then we'll do some practice together for half hour or so related to the text. So I think most of you know me, but those of you that don't know me, really I invite discussion and questions throughout the presentation. So please feel free to interject, and please feel free to kind of push back on any points that aren't going in smoothly or that you feel resistance towards, or any interesting ideas in response to. Please really feel free to jump in, and if you feel comfortable to have your video on, that would be great, so I can see your faces, and they won't be recorded, so don't worry if you're in your PJs. All right, so we're going to do 8 Verses of Thought Transformation by Geshe Langri Tangpa. And I think for those of you that know this text and those of you that don't know this text, just know that the main frame is radical reframing. So the assumption is that you already have a good analytical mind. You're able to understand nuance. You're able to play with ideas creatively and see things from a number of perspectives simultaneously. So this is not a black and white type of teaching. This is not a teaching that says yes and no in kind of clear black and white terms. This is a way of playing with whatever is happening in your life, happiness or suffering, but in particular suffering, and seeing it as useful fuel for the spiritual path. And so the danger with Lojong, Lojong is the Tibetan word for thought transformation. The danger with Lojong thought transformation texts is that you will understand them and think that understanding means being able to practice it right away. Because you're smart people, you've been educated, you've thought about life, you're adults, you will understand these teachings fairly quickly. I have faith in you. The problem is that having understood it, you will think you can do it, and you will either lie to yourself that you're doing it or feel bad that it's not integrating as quickly as you'd like. These are radical teachings. This isn't like positive thinking. This is not pop psychology. It's not even cognitive behavioral therapy. It's incredibly sophisticated. And so to do Lojong teachings well, assume you won't be able to. Right? And let it live in kind of curious, playful creativity for a while, and gently explore how life might be were you to adopt these attitudes. Don't assume that you can adopt these attitudes. Play with what life might be like were you to be able to. And then gradually, as the years go by, as your familiarity with this text goes in, then you'll notice that the verses themselves will kick in during your everyday life and protect your mind from anger, attachment, pride, jealousy. They will rise up as shields, but not barriers. They will protect you from your own negative states of mind and from all of the difficult conditions in the world. But just understanding them is not enough. We really have to play with how will this play out in my everyday life. So with that in mind, I'm just going to give you a very short frame for what these verses are about in Lojong, the genre in general. So Lojong, or thought transformation mind training, these are techniques for radical reframing and transformation of suffering. So the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, referenced techniques of this type during his lifetime. They became prominent and popularized through the Nalanda tradition of India, and especially emphasized by Tibetan Buddhist traditions through Lama Atisha, Geshe Chekowa, Geshe Langri Tangpa, and other great masters to this very day. So they became popularized kind of around the 8th century, and in particular, the Tibetan tradition are the traditions that have been holding the Lojong tradition the most specifically or the most explicitly, although all forms of Buddhism talk about thought transformation in some form or another. And so the main work of Lojong, or thought transformation teachings, is to overcome self-cherishing and self-grasping. So these are the enemy, right? The enemy is not out there. The enemy is also not you. The enemy is the symptoms of your ignorance. So self-cherishing is the deeply ingrained thought that cherishes your own self and makes you oblivious to others' well-being. So looking after yourself, good, but in such a way that it makes you oblivious to others' well-being, bad, right? Obvious. Self-grasping, then, is instinctively or innately believing in the intrinsic existence of your own self as well as of the external world. So these two thoughts, self-cherishing and self-grasping, are the primary focus of combat in mind training practices. So 8 verses of thought transformation, 1 through 7, eliminate self-cherishing through the method side of the path, and verse 8 eliminates self-grasping through the wisdom side of the path. So that's just kind of the rough frame that we're working on. The idea is that because we have this innate ignorance, we have misunderstood how this self exists in relation to others. We have misunderstood it. We've seen it to be this independent entity that it is not. So based on our false view of self, then others are either objects to give us pleasure or objects that give us harm. We objectify others. We see them in this very dualistic way. We see situations and surroundings as either benefiting us or harming us. We constantly centralize. We make ourselves the main character all the time. So thought transformation teachings, they're hitting 2 levels of difficulty. One level is the fact that we have this innate ignorance. One is the fact that because of that, we've developed this whole story of self, which is a big lie. So self-cherishing is easily misunderstood because it sounds like you're not allowed to take care of yourself. Actually, what's being said is you need to take care of yourself in a very specific way, a way that is much more healthy than how we take care of ourselves now. So if you need to work for the welfare of all sentient beings, if you want to grow into your fullest potential, complete enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, you need to pace yourself. You need to eat well, you need to exercise in mindful ways, you need to get enough sleep, you need to seek out healthy companionship, you need to pursue meaningful work, and you need to get out into nature and see the beautiful blue sky. The basics that your grandmother taught you are true. Yeah, those basic things are true, and seeking them out is not self-cherishing. Seeking them out at the expense of others or with indifference to others, with a me first attitude is. So what happens is that we might think, oh, I don't have self-cherishing because I don't even like myself. And you eat lots of junk food and watch all sorts of junk food TV and read all sorts of junk food magazines and see all sorts of junk food sites. And you think that's not self-cherishing because you don't even like yourself. But actually, that is self-cherishing because you're saying your life is only about you. If it doesn't hurt anyone else directly, it's no big deal. And you're completely minimizing your profound impact on the world. So you're having an impact whether you acknowledge it or not. Why not make it a positive one? So self-cherishing really makes us in this kind of blinkered sort of view, like racehorses, where they have those little shields and they can't see on either side of them and they just see what's ahead of them. Self-cherishing does that to us. And so we're just kind of looking for what's going to get in our way and what's going to help us out. And it's very human and very natural, but it keeps our life very small and it keeps our mind really weak and it makes us fragile and hypersensitive and easily offended. And then when things go wrong, whatever that means, it gets to us. And so what we're trying to remember is the times in our life when we've been grounded, happy, and relaxed, and we've had a wider focus. Our relationship to difficulties has been very different in such times. You can still be like, oh, that's not what I wanted to happen, but it doesn't get to you. There's no hook in you. Yeah, just think of something simple like the drive home from work on a good day and the drive home from work on a bad day, with the exact same amount of traffic in both days. On a good day, you're like, oh yeah, traffic, it's to be expected. Yeah, it takes about this long to get home. What am I going to do during that time to feel content and to feel some sort of meaning in this journey? On a bad day, everyone's in your way. Everything's a problem, and you get home agitated. The same amount of traffic, right? So we're trying to understand all of these different ways that self-cherishing steals our peace of mind and steals our good, kind heart. And so the 8 verses is actively combating that. Self-grasping is, in a way, easier to understand, even though it's harder to pinpoint experientially, because we've understood something about the philosophical system of Buddhism. We've understood a little bit that the way things appear is not the way things exist. The way things appear is as if they are inherently existent. The way they exist is that they are dependently arisen. So that we kind of can get our head around with a little bit of thought, but we don't see its active influence in our life all the time. So self-cherishing and self-grasping are like master and slave, or they're like best friends that are terrible, right? And should really be separated. Yeah, so then you can adjust both of them and bring health to the mind. Lots of different ways of looking at them. But I think it's useful to start the 8 verses of thought transformation with the last one. Yeah, we usually start at the beginning. We're going to start at the end. So starting at the end, let's see what we can do to get rid of self-cherishing and self-grasping, or at least get them a little bit under control. So verse 8, the very last verse, undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. So the first word to pick out is superstitions. Yeah, superstitions or nomtok, misconceptions, false conceptions. We have all of these, we would say superstitions in the world. It's not like don't walk under a ladder superstitions or don't let a black cat walk in front of you superstitions. We're talking about the deep superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. To become undefiled by them, we need to see all phenomena as illusory, and that will release us from the bondage of attachment. Okay, so the 8 worldly concerns are these preoccupations or samsaric dharmas, which are basically hope and fear. Hope for happiness, fear of suffering. Hope for fame, fear of insignificance. Hope for praise, fear of blame. Hope for gain, fear of loss. Or we could just kind of like write them all in a list as attachments and aversions, neurotic hopes and fears. And this is the content of our daily life, right? We're walking around in our daily life. We're trying to get stuff and not lose it. We're trying to get comfortable and not be uncomfortable. We're trying to be spoken well to and avoid being criticized. And we want to be thought well of and not have people talk badly about us behind our back. And all of that is very human and normal and natural. The problem is it's under the influence of self-grasping and self-cherishing. So the bondage in the verse is referring to uncontrolled cyclic existence. The attachment refers to an exaggeration of the good or positive impact of a person, situation, or object, and clings to that as a source of happiness and pleasure. Due to this exaggeration, unrealistic expectations are created and are inevitably disappointed, leading to anger and despair. So the eight worldly concerns wouldn't be a problem if they didn't have attachment and aversion. They wouldn't be a problem. They would just be normal strategies of life. But we have believed that this is the true sources of our happiness and suffering. That if I get the thing I want, I will be happy. If I lose the thing I want, I will suffer. That's a superstition. That's an exaggeration. So we need to understand the bondage attachment gives us. Okay. So when you're thinking about, again, the difference between a good day and a bad day, or an afflicted day and a less afflicted day, if you, I don't know, get a good deal at the supermarket, it's nice, right? Or if something is more expensive than usual, it's a little annoying, but it doesn't steal your peace or give you a rush. It doesn't make these like big peaks or these big dips. But if you're really wound up, something as simple as the thing you want being more expensive than usual can somehow say something about society, the world, your whole life, and how everything is wrong. Yeah, it can suddenly blow up into a story. Or the fact that something is on sale, it can mean, oh, the universe is collaborating to give me abundance. But do you see how in both cases, you're the main character? You're the center of the story. You're the hero or you're the victim. You've made it all about you. And not only have you made it all about you, you've made the substance the cause of your happiness or suffering, and you're giving it too much credit. Yeah. So what happens if then you have a family disaster, you have a natural disaster, you have a national disaster, you have an election you don't like, you have a workplace situation that's problematic, you have something that even objectively people would say, yes, that is hard. Do you have to suffer just because it wasn't what you wanted? This is the problem, isn't it? We feel like there's an inevitable correlation. This isn't what I wanted, therefore I have to feel bad. We don't say that to ourselves, but they're like linked together as if there is no choice. But a million times in your life, you've gotten something you didn't want, and it didn't disturb your peace because you had enough spaciousness around it to roll with it, or to see it in a good way, or to see it in a useful light. Yeah, it might have been simple, small things that you take for granted. But, I mean, say you're walking along on a hike, you get a rock in your shoe. That's not what you wanted. But then you stop and get the rock out of your shoe, and you notice a beautiful scene that you wouldn't have noticed if you had kept walking. It made you stop. You caught your breath. You realized, oh, I'd gotten breathless and hadn't even noticed. The rock in your shoe is not what you wanted. You're not suddenly saying, oh, good, I got a rock in my shoe. But the result of it wound up being something useful. Look at this beautiful scene. Oh, good, I get to catch my breath. Something good can come of it. So this is a simple example of the most basic form of Lojong. You're not pretending to like the bad thing. You're not pretending to like the difficulty. You're saying the difficulty will be useful. But I can name it as a difficulty. I can name it as this is not what I wanted, but it is what I wanted. You can't skip that step of first acknowledging how you felt about it. I didn't want that rock in my shoe. A rock in my shoe is problematic. Yeah, I didn't want so and so to be in this role. So and so being in this role is problematic. You can say that, but if you give it the power to take your peace, what is the point of that? But some days, doesn't it feel inevitable? Like you had no choice but to lose your peace. So this is the thing to challenge and to really ask ourselves, why though? Why have we given over all the power to the very thing that we're mad at? Now we've compounded it. Or something beautiful and good happens, we give all the credit to the person or the place or the situation, forgetting that it was our mind's attitude about it that was the main thing. Beautiful things happen every day that go unnoticed, right? We have a beautiful sunset every day. We have a beautiful sunrise every day. The weather has an aspect of beauty every day. There are beautiful things about our friends and family to notice every day. They go unnoticed, except for those moments when you choose to build a frame around it and point and say, look, isn't that beautiful? Now I feel so happy. It must be because that was so beautiful. But it was beautiful yesterday too, and it didn't have an impact on you. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's obvious to us, the power of the mind, but then we forget how powerful the mind is when something surprising happens or something that we've labeled as deeply unacceptable happens. So with Lojong, you are able to act, but you're acting from a place of deepest wisdom. And so the first thing is to really think, what is my relationship to the 8 worldly concerns? How much of the day is spent obsessed with comfort or worried about discomfort? We can say attached to pleasure, averse to pain, but what if we make it a little less high stakes? What if it's just trying to get comfortable? So you're sitting in your chair right now, or you're sitting on the floor. On a relaxed moment, you make a few moments of adjustments and then you settle. When you're agitated, you just keep fidgeting. I need one more cushion. I need one less cushion. I should sit higher. I should sit lower. Adjust, 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 adjust. So the first couple moments of adjustment are normal and practical and fine. You don't have to overthink it. But think about how your mind gets when it's obsessed with comfort. Because if you become obsessed with comfort, you will notice the way in which you are never 100% comfortable, and that will agitate your mind. Yeah, because even when you're comfortable, you're not 100% comfortable. Yeah, there's one part of your body that's a little annoyed about something. Bit of a draft here, bit of a tense muscle there, bit of an annoying light glare there. You could choose to be annoyed, but you don't get annoyed when something good has captured your attention. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So we're annoying ourselves all the time, right? And if you're, thinking that everything needs to be good and still and perfect in order to be happy, you will never be happy. Yeah. So you're bringing back this knowledge that you already have. You're bringing it back on purpose. And this is the way to get over the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. Yeah, is to really think these are lies I tell myself. And it is true that it's good to be warm enough and well fed enough, but we don't have to get obsessed with comfort because it will never be enough. It's a samsaric body. Yeah, and so the fact that it's not perfect is to be expected. And then you shift and you think of another set of the 8 worldly concerns, gain and loss, whether material gain and loss of a person, gain and loss of a situation. Absolutely, there are some people who are of great value to our life, who really bring a lot of powerful experiences that are mutually beneficial, and honoring that is really important and really beautiful. What's not useful is to say, I cannot be happy if they are not here. You're giving them a power they didn't even want. They don't want the power to take your happiness, right? So, so I think of, my own teacher who's far away in Australia and I miss him and I would like to see him. Sure, of course. But if I think I cannot be happy unless he is in front of me, he would be so annoyed, right? He would be like, oh, for goodness sake, have you learned nothing? Yeah. Or if I think when he's in front of me, that is why I'm happy. He is a condition. He's a powerful condition. But I've been plenty grumpy when he was right in front of me, or confused, or annoyed, or disillusioned. I've had the whole spectrum of emotions with him right in front of me. Why am I saying he's the cause of this one and not that one? We tell ourselves these stories and we disempower ourselves. Yeah. So much of the day is spent trying not to lose something, someone, or something situationally, or trying to get someone to be closer, trying to get something to behave properly, trying to get an object, right? And the idea is that if I do, then I will be happy, or if I don't, then I will be sad. And it is so simplistic, but it's not like it's not true at all. There is a truth there. But the problem with self-cherishing and self-grasping is they add a superstition to it. Yeah, it is true that walking underneath a ladder is not a great idea, but it's not going to be the end of the world, right? We're adult people, we know that. We would say being paranoid about walking under a ladder is really superstitious and childish. But of course, if you walk under a ladder, it could fall on your head. That's, avoid it if you can, but don't get weird about it, right? But we don't see all of the everyday superstitions of the eight worldly concerns. We don't see all of the ways that we're chasing something or running from something. And that something was never the main thing. It was always the mind that we brought to it. How much of the day is spent trying to get people to say nice things to us and not criticize us? Or if we don't care about speech, we care about reputation. You want to be thought well of and not thought badly of. Yeah. Just, it's not like we want fame. It's not like we're afraid of infamy. The stakes aren't usually that high. But we do kind of want people to think we're a nice, professional, not, intelligent something person. Yeah. And we don't really want people to think that we're mean or that we're stupid or that we're incompetent. That's fine on one level, but the obsession takes over. The superstitions of the eight worldly concerns, the superstitions of self-cherishing and self-grasping take over and say, if this happens, I cannot be happy. Or I cannot be happy unless this happens. It just oversimplifies life. So, undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the eight worldly concerns, may I, by seeing all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. So to see all phenomena as illusory means that you see that you're projecting. You might not be able to see reality. You might not be able to realize emptiness of inherent existence directly yet, but you can start to see the illusory nature of things now. Right now, you can see that there is an assumption that things exist just as they seem. Yeah, that out the window is good weather or bad weather, in and of itself, divorced from context. Yeah, you look out the window, it's good weather or it's bad weather, decide. And then see, can I decide that that same exact weather means something else with 2 seconds of analysis and reframing? Sure. Yeah, it's a cold, windy day here in Oregon. It's a cold, windy day. Is it bad weather? Yes. Is it good weather? Yes. Because I'm cozy, I'm at home, I'm warm and snug talking about Dharma. It's a perfect day because it's a perfect day to stay home and talk about Dharma. Even that is too simplistic a story, but see how quickly you can reframe things. In neither of these cases are you saying it's not cold and windy. It's just what you're deciding cold and windy means. So this is the trick with understanding Lojong, is that you're not telling yourself a fairy story, that things are other than the kind of objective realities that are there, even though those still have an illusory characteristic. You're still able to say cold and windy, or not the elected official I had hoped, or not the coworker dynamic I would appreciate, or not the food that is my favorite. You're allowed to say all of those things. Those are just no longer the criteria for your happiness or suffering. Do you have questions so far or thoughts coming up? Yeah, Yuko, go ahead.
Yes. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for the teaching. I lost my husband in January, and then now, after 10 months, finally I started seeing sort of light at the tunnel
Yeah,
and started having energy and started living again.
yeah,
But then his youngest brother had a brain hemorrhage and died this month, that December 3rd.
yeah,
And family is in great shock and in turmoil.
yeah.
One of the sisters started talking about why this is happening on the family.
Mm,
Maybe our prayer is wrong. God is upset. And then started killing our brothers. And then yesterday she said, maybe my husband Abraham told this youngest brother to join him in heaven.
mm,
And I am so confused. All these very good Christians
mm.
suddenly lost some kind of, I don't know, faith or something, thrown into confusion, and they
Yeah,
cannot sense anything anymore.
yeah,
And suddenly, when I'm listening to you, I started understanding they are not seeing what happening as it is,
yeah,
trying to understand the reason why this is happening. Something wrong with us. Let's
yeah,
pray. Or maybe that prayer is wrong. It's just, it's an turmoil causing more turmoil. That's what I felt
yeah.
this moment.
And and
Thank you.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And back-to-back loss is, can really be very destabilizing. Absolutely. And then we all respond to that kind of thing differently. And you see your whole family responding differently to the same events. And, with objectivity and space, it can teach you that everybody's reality is different. Maybe even my own reality, I could question and become curious about. And also, why do we revert to feeling like we're being punished or rewarded? By whom? For what? Obviously in Buddhism, that's not our belief system. But even if it was, why would a creator God be so harsh? It's an interesting thing that happens when we're destabilized. We revert to feeling the victim of something or the hero of something. And it does show us how strong our self-cherishing and self-grasping are. But in the moment of that kind of grief is not the time to talk to someone about their self-cherishing and their self-grasping. They're not going to have the space to hear it, right? They will just feel like you don't understand and that you don't have compassion. So it's so difficult with so many different responses like this, but this is what happens in families, isn't it? That when there's a big event and another big event, everyone is destabilized and you start to see what people's worldview has been, because we revert to what our actual refuges have been and our actual worldviews have been. So in this case, it seems like the best we can do is to really connect to our own spiritual refuge and then look for opportunities to bring out the best in others and to remind them of the best sides of their worldview. Not to tell them something different than their worldview, but to think of what are the best parts of their worldview and to invite those out gently when there's space so that they can feel held by the good parts of their refuge. But it's very delicate, isn't it? And I really, my heart goes to you. My heart really goes to you. And so these 8 verses, they are confronting because they really ask us to become a little bit provocative about our own experience and to really say, is what I'm experiencing necessary? Is my response to reality the inevitable response? Or do I have more choice than I've allowed myself? So, it can be quite deep practice, these verses. And if you can think about them in quiet moments when there's not too much going wrong, they're much more likely to kick in big moments where you're really surprised and really destabilized. But whenever it occurs to you, it's good. Bring it in. But these are the sort of teachings that are very much an inner conversation and not usually something to share with others unless they're really open or really seeming flexible. Yeah. Yeah. What other thoughts are coming up for you guys? These are big, big provocative ideas and can be easily misunderstood. Yeah, Lynn, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you, Venerable. I think I'm probably not alone in this, but as I've been trying to process my feelings about the election, and I think I guess I've been really trying to not get spun out into the disaster, catastrophizing, all of that. And I guess this has been extremely helpful and enlightening. I've tried to remind myself. I mean, I think it's non-attachment, but it's also this idea that nobody promised us that everything was going to stay the same. That the way we like it or the way we think it should be is the way it's going to remain, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's the we don't get to sign up for that. Um, and in the same way, on the flip side, when there's things that we don't like, we also remind ourselves that that's not forever. But so I guess I'm trying to work in some of this for my own thinking and just to remain in a place that I can still, feel good about life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That there's some, that um, we all have something to learn from all of this, I hope,
Yeah.
or I do anyway. Yeah.
No, all of us. And I think that what you're describing is really, really relatable. And sometimes the way that we view impermanence is useful and healthy, and sometimes the way we view impermanence is kind of like we hold our breath until it's over. And we're like, I'm glad it's going to end, but I'll just hold my breath until it's over, and I'm not allowed to live until this chapter passes. Like we've pushed pause on joy and we've not completely given up or completely gone into despair because we know that there have been dark ages before and they've been followed by a renaissance and that this is the way history has always been, that there is light and then dark and back and forth the pendulum swings. We know this, we've studied history, but right now is a hard time. We kind of do this, yeah, where we're just sort of,
Why me?
yeah, why me?
Why
Or when
us?
does it end?
Why
Or
us?
absolutely. And there's something about giving ourselves permission to be joyful as a radical act and giving ourselves really the power to keep an open heart when we don't get what we want. Yeah, all of the tiny ways and medium ways and giant ways that are we're not getting what we want. Somehow you meet that with the compassion for yourself that says it is okay to have needs and wants. It is okay to prefer certain things. This is all okay. And also, if I tell myself a concrete story of this is the only way to happiness, then I'm just shooting myself in the foot, and what good am I to anyone, including myself, if I allow external circumstances to pull me into despair or rage? So it's so much easier said than done, but if you can find some medium stakes situation in your life that you can get better at. Don't go for a tiny thing that doesn't matter. Don't go for the biggest thing that is really, really hard in your life. But some small thing, your neighbor using the snow blower, or there's gunshots in the background because people are hunting and it upsets you. Something that's like, it's not going to change anytime soon, and it does bother you. Pick something like that. It's not going to change anytime soon, and it does bother you, but it's not something that like eats at you and keeps you awake at night. Something of that level. Okay. So you take something of that level as your project, because that's going to build your strength for the big stuff. And you think, what is my superstition here? Where is my misconception here? Where have I given this situation the power to give or take happiness? So first you name it, and then you look at what is the worldly logic in there. Because if you talk over the top of your valid observations, thought transformation is not going to work. You'll just kind of put a lid on an uncomfortable feeling and tell a pretty story over the top. It's like you've got a big pile of poo and now you've put frosting on it. It's not a cake. You will never believe it's a cake, even if it has frosting on it. It's still a pile of poo, right? So what you're wanting is for the pile of poo to start to feel like compost. And you want compost for rich soil for new growth. Do you know what I mean? So what is the potential compost in your life that right now is just a big steaming heap that's stinky? So you're thinking about something in your life like that, and you're letting yourself notice the whole story about it, and then you're starting to understand what are the components I will keep. Yeah, this, and this is not ideal. It would be better if this, and this changed. Yes, that part of the story is true. Now, the emotional loading I've given to that component is unnecessary or overblown or self-defeating. So you're starting to tease out observations from your emotional response to them. And how do you do that? You think about different ways of approaching the same information. Yeah, from another perspective, it's useful. From another perspective, it's neutral. From another perspective, it's even worse than it seems. And you're just letting yourself be creative with the story in its kind of raw form. And that can bring that flexibility of mind back to you. And that can empower you to meet the same circumstances differently. So do this with human beings, do this with objects, do this with situations. But when you're really starting to notice what is the superstition, that is the key to this whole thing. Jai, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, so I feel like I have some, what can I say, some ability, tricks up my sleeve that I can deal with this with individuals.
Yeah.
Okay, what happens to me is I totally lose it when I'm dealing with governmental bureaucracy, or I'm dealing with corporations, particularly, say, grocery stores, an example, and I can tell you how many ways that they cheat, right?
Yeah.
Now, I can't seem to calm down about that. So I'm wondering what advice you can give, working on that level. I try to tell myself, okay, think, these are individuals, right? They are individuals with Buddha nature, send motherly,
Yeah.
it's so hard. So I'm just wondering if you've got any tricks up your sleeve that
Yeah.
could help this angry lady over here. Thank you.
I mean, other people jump in, but I mean, part of it is that it feels like the essence of the anger is fed by a feeling of powerlessness. And if it was one person, you would feel a little bit more flexibility to kind of navigate the situation. But when it's this conglomerate of kind of unseen faces that have the power to bring all sorts of suffering to sentient beings, including yourself, that powerlessness really fuels the anger. Is that kind of part of it? Do you think the powerlessness feeling?
I think that is extremely accurate, extremely accurate. And then also motivated by my strong sense of wanting to fight injustice, because this impacts not only me, but other people. So that feeds into my upset as well.
Yep. Yep. And it's another one of those cases where it feels like the upset is an inevitable conclusion to the observation.
Yes.
The upset is not an inevitable conclusion to what you have observed. There's what you've observed, and then holding that. How would you hold that same content if it was something you read in a history book? You would think, oh, that's outrageous. That shouldn't happen. How unjust, how unkind, how greedy, how etc. But it wouldn't have the same emotional loading because it's come and gone. And so it's somehow trying to hold the same content, but then play with it in such a way that you don't have the same reactivity.
I'll point out that I can read about the robber barons in America and feel like, well, what I'm dealing with now are just, their offspring, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that
Same as it ever was, right? Same as it ever was. Talking heads, right? It's
I also try to use the argument, okay, now, Jay, think about this. This is your karma, honey. You've certainly done stuff that means that you are exposed to this kind of abuse, right?
yeah.
And to try to accept that. And I make some headway with that, but not as much as I would like.
Well,
Okay?
that's the question is, do you want to use method or do you want to use wisdom? Someday we'll be able to use them both simultaneously. But
Yes,
in
ma'am.
terms of what's going to diffuse the upset, it sounds like you have tried method, like thinking about karma, like thinking about they've all been your kind mother, like you've thought of lots of methods. But maybe what if you were to try wisdom instead and to look at how there is no inherently existent agent, action, or object of harm in and of itself, or that the proportion of harm is not necessarily a universally agreed on harm. For some person, that is a very big deal. For another person, it's not a big deal at all. All of these proportions are relative. All of these proportions are contextual. So somehow bringing in the wisdom by thinking about pen and arising, the story shifts because there are days when you've been distracted with another activity and the same issue exists, but it doesn't get to you. So if it was the issue that made you feel this way, then as long as there was the issue, you would feel this way. But it's only when you turn your attention towards it in a certain way that it brings up all of this toxic emotion. So thinking about it from a lot of different angles of the feeling is not an inevitable conclusion to the observation. The feeling happens when I think in these sets of ways, which were conditioned by my upbringing, my family of origin, my experiences and as an adult, the cultures that I've lived in, the suffering that I've seen, et cetera, et cetera. And there are so many other problematic things happening in the world that don't get to me at all. Right? They're happening, but they don't get to us. If you were to turn your attention towards them and think about them a great deal, it might also get to you, right? But they already exist. It's kind of like if you think about the conflict in the Middle East and the conflict in Syria, does one of them get to you more than the other? And why? And then you're like, well, I wasn't even worried about those until you brought them up. But now that you're reminding me, now I'm really upset. They were happening before I reminded you. right? So them happening
Trust me,
is
I've
not
been
why you
unhappy
feel this
about
way.
all that as well. No,
Yeah,
that's already on my unhappy plate.
on your unhappy list. Yeah, you will. There is no end to the bad behavior of sentient beings, right?
Yeah.
And if we're to think, again, going back to method, and if wisdom's too soon or too much or too deep, go back to method and think, all right, Shantideva would say, unruly beings are as unlimitless as space. I could never overcome them all. But yeah, just like you would never try and pave the world in leather, but if you wear shoes, problem solved, right? So if you tame this mind, those things don't get to you. And that doesn't mean you're complacent about them. It's somehow making it, in a way, a bigger deal. Not a less big deal, but a bigger deal. You think this outrageous situation is too important for me to be angry. Because if I'm angry, I lose creativity. I lose communication techniques. I lose flexibility. This is too important for me to allow the wish to harm to co-opt it.
And if
I
I
will not allow
do
it.
let my anger overcome, one clear priority for me is to try to channel bodhicitta, yeah,
Yeah,
to that
yeah,
energy. And
yeah.
so if I go back and remind myself, as you say, this is interfering with that, and that's super important to me. I'll also volunteer that sadly, emptiness or wisdom is my short suit.
You'll circle back when you're ready. Circle back when you're ready.
I'm ready now. I'm working on it, but it's just not there.
Yeah, and with all of these, I always try and find the identical problem in myself, whether it's the tiny tyrant or the tiny dictator or the tiny prime minister who is, acting in horrible, selfish, greedy ways. What is the form of that is inside of me that is operating through my self-cherishing and self-grasping? What is the tiny corporation within me that makes me neglect the needs of a certain population or not realize my negative impact on a certain population? How do I, in a way, make these bad behaved people, places, things, how do I make it relatable and personal? Because then there's this like flow of, that's not good, but I forgive you, or that's not good, but I understand why. Now let's fix it.
Yep.
Now let's fix it. So you're not letting people off the hook, but when you can find it relatable, the pathways of empathy lead to pathways of compassion. And so much of our anger is fed by the sentence, I just don't understand why they fill in the blank. I just don't understand why they. Which means if you did understand why they, you might release a little bit, deeply understand, not just, I know why they do it because of greed. If you deeply understood greed, right? If you deeply understood the fear of deprivation and the attachment to certain objects, and you really saw that in yourself, there is
And
a release that happens towards them.
yeah.
So I just don't understand why they don't make it too simple a story. You think, I do understand that it's greed. Oh, where does greed come from? Yeah, where does ignorance come from? Where does suffering come from? And then eventually you're going to hit, oh, just like me,
Yeah. Agreed. I
even if
agree.
they're behaviors you would never do.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, so gently, gently, but it's something that it can be really powerful to make bad behavior relatable,
Okay.
which is not the same as letting anyone off the hook for it, but to really see how would a person come to such a mistake. Yeah.
Okay. Many thanks as always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Leo, go ahead. And then we'll have a short break and do the practice with all verses. Yeah, go ahead, Leo.
Hi, Venerable.
Thank
Good to see you. Thank you for your teachings. And Yuko, I'm so sorry for your loss and I wish you well. So what I was thinking here is that what happens is that all this perception that is needed for us, it comes with a lot of vigilance and introspection. And sometimes our minds are not really like we don't have a mental balance. and our vigilance is not like sharp.
Mm.
So in these cases, we're just dragged by our thoughts, and then we end up talking things or doing things that we regret.
Yeah.
And what's been happening to me is that I'm really being able right now to see my own limitations, and every time I start feeling like I'm vulnerable by some thought or something that happens, what I try to do is to make a contingency plan. Like
Mm.
I'm completely silenced, or I I'm honest to the people around me. Like I say what I'm feeling right now. Like I don't have I I'm not uh I don't have a lot of patience right now or something like that. But there are always the days that I'm reactive, and then I end up saying things or doing things that I don't like. But I guess that's it, right? I guess it's kind of practicing every day and then trying to sharpen more and more. And one day we'll be able, I don't know, to get better on that.
Yeah, I think that's very relatable, being dragged by the thoughts. Yeah. It's, there's the verse that says, vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I will confront and avert it without delay. And that can sound like a lot of pressure, but what it's really saying is if you can catch it while it's small, catching it is enough. Yeah, so if you can notice a tiny mood, a tiny sadness, melancholy, a tiny irritability, a tiny disassociation, just your mind noticing that, it will run out of steam. It will fall apart. But if you don't notice it when it's small, it will gather strength and be harder and harder to combat. And you'll wind up with a day with a terrible mood and all sorts of mistakes of body, speech, and mind. And it's almost like you have to wait to sober up from the negative emotion. So if there's something about that vigilance, the moment a delusion occurs in my mind, endangering myself, endangering others, I'll confront and avert it without delay. It's really starting to understand what is the smallest form I can catch. So you use your memory and you think, what am I like in the very beginnings of anger? What am I like in the very beginnings of despair? What am I like in the very beginnings of attachment? All of these. And then you start to notice, my jaw is becoming tense, or my brow is becoming furrowed, or I'm starting to get tight shoulders. Okay, that's an indication. Or there's a tightness in my stomach. You're noticing some physical cue. Or you notice your thoughts freeze or speed up, depending, right? Okay, that's a cue. And just that noticing, they dispel. So of course it takes practice, but I think sometimes we feel like we're going to battle with our worst afflictions, and we would save so much time if we just went to war with the tiny, tiny version of them. Then they dissolve like a puff of smoke. Yeah, Kim, go ahead, and then we'll have a little break.
Yeah, at one point, I just reflected on how hard it is to not beat ourselves up when you come into the day-to-day things that set you off and you realize that they're setting you off, and you don't have that spaciousness to see your options or to reflect differently, and
Yeah.
and then trying to find the self-compassion for those feelings. I know practice should help. But yeah, I was just wondering if you had other ideas. Thank you.
Of when you missed your window.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight helps, like let yourself learn the lesson. Sometimes we just beat ourselves up for not learning the lesson. We're just like, I shouldn't have, I couldn't have, why did I? And we're just sort of beating ourselves up. And more useful is to think, oh, okay, what's happened? A little bit like a scientist and be like, oh, actually, earlier in the day, I did not have enough breakfast. And then I had coffee on an empty stomach. And then I started getting a little grumpy because of that thing that happened with the work email. And then it built into this, into this, into this. I could have caught it at that little feeling early in the morning of being too busy to eat a proper breakfast. Or at that point when I opened my emails and I was already annoyed just seeing the subject heading or, whatever it was, but you kind of use the failure and then it's not a failure. To not even think of it as a failure, to think of it as, oh, I've got a fresh one. I've got a fresh incident to analyze. This has happened a million times in my life, but this is recent enough for me to unpack. Good, good, you know? So treating it like that, I think then it keeps it, I think just a little bit more playful. It keeps your sense of humor. And it also is like, you're not missing the moment. So there's nothing in Buddhism that says if you do something wrong, you should feel bad. There is nothing in Buddhism that says that. Feeling bad does not help. We feel like it's the payment we make for having done the wrong thing. Karma will get us in any case, right? The bad feeling will come. No need to invite it. Yes? Best to purify with that kind of clean, clear mind that goes, whoops, okay, start again. Whoops, okay, start again. Not this heavy guilt, over-identification, story of justifications, defensiveness, excuses. Just be like, oh, that was the wrong thing. Whoops, how did that happen? And you're just treating it a lot more objectively. Yeah. The feeling bad never helps. Yeah. Yeah, okay, let's have a 5-minute break and then we'll do the meditation that goes with it. And I'll leave you with a picture of Chenrezig in the break. There you go. See you soon. So we'll do a practice called Ever-Flowing Nectar of Bodhicitta, which combines the 8 verses with Chenrezig practice. So just take a minute and get yourself into meditation posture. Settling and grounding. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I prostrate to the holy body of Supreme Arya, Great Compassionate One. I present clouds of every type of offering, both actually arranged and mentally emanated. I confess all my negative actions and downfalls collected from beginningless time. I rejoice in the virtues of ordinary beings and Aryas. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for transmigratory beings. I dedicate my own and others' virtues to the great enlightenment. Usaji puki joshi meto tram ri ra pingji ni te gempadi sanghe jindu mi te uwai roku namla jila ju pasho. Please bless us that the lives of the glorious gurus be long, that all beings equaling the extent of space be happy, that I and others, without exception, collect merits and purify obscurations, and that we quickly achieve Buddhahood. Precious Guru, please grant all the realizations of the path, from correctly following the virtuous friend up to the completion of training, the unified state of Vajradhara. Please bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles, that I may cease all wrong conceptions immediately, generate the two precious bodhicittas. Hidam Guru Ratnamanda Kamniyatayami. So think that Guru Chenrezig is extremely pleased by our request, and together with the moon disk and lotus, comes to the crown of our heads. And so with each of the 8 verses, we visualize that from the syllable Hri at Chenrezig's heart, much blissful white nectar streams down into the crown of our heads. It fills our whole bodies, purifying all obscurations and bringing you all the realizations of the entire path to enlightenment, from correctly following the virtuous friend up to Buddhahood. It also purifies the specific obscurations and grants the specific realizations related to the particular verse you're contemplating. Determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I shall hold them most dear at all times. And blissful nectar flows down from Chenrezig, down through the crown of your head, purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from holding others most dear. Those difficult beings, being a way we can develop patience. Those helpful beings, ways we can be reminded of the benefit of compassion, love. Every single sentient being so precious. Whether they intend to be of benefit, they are of benefit. May we hold them most dear. And so let your mind be in quiet analysis with the gentle visualization of white nectar from the Buddha of compassion to you. Verse 2. Wherever I am and with whomever I am with, I always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart hold others dear and supreme. And the blissful white nectar flows down and purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from considering yourself the lowest of all, from holding others dear and supreme. And so just let your mind connect with your understanding of humility, humility that accompanies a self-confidence, not a humility that accompanies self-loathing. That open place of learning, receptive to whatever can be learned from others. And the white nectar light brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which considers yourself the lowest and holds other most dear and supreme. Verse 3. In all actions, I examine my mental continuum, and the minute a delusion arises, since it endangers myself and others, I forcefully confront and avert it. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from confronting and averting delusions the minute they arise. Brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, as well as the wisdom realizing emptiness, which ceases all delusions. Verse 4. Whenever I see sentient beings who are wicked in nature and overwhelmed by negative actions and heavy suffering, I hold such rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. And the blissful white nectar, flowing down, purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from holding wicked sentient beings dear. Brings all realizations. And so we think of those sentient beings who are so strongly habituated to negativity. It's as if it is their nature. Of course, all beings have Buddha nature, but some have really thoroughly invested in what we might call evil. Those ones are rare. Those ones show us the powerful problem of the afflictions so directly. They show us how conditional our love and compassion might be. These rare ones show so much. We can learn so much about ourselves and others when they come into view. May I see them as a precious treasure. Verse 5. When, out of envy, others mistreat me with abuse, insults, or the like, I accept defeat and offer the victory to them. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from accepting defeat and offering the victory to others. Brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which accepts defeat and offers the victory to others. So letting this white nectar light soothe competitiveness, remove us from the game. May we understand deeply the suffering and afflictions that drive those who seek to harm us. And instead of retaliating, let them win, let them have it. Let the cycle of violence, whether verbal, physical, or psychic, may it all end with me. I will not meet harm with harmful reactions. Verse 6. When someone whom I have benefited and in whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I regard them as my virtuous friend. And the blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that prevents you from seeing those who harm you as your holy virtuous friend, brings all realizations, especially loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, which enables you to achieve the perfection of patience, to see harmful beings as your holy virtuous friend. May this blissful white nectar light help us understand betrayal, help us see even the deepest disappointments as fuel for our path. Verse 7. In short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness and benefit to all my mothers. I secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering. And so you can think as written, the white nectar light, or you can take this moment to connect with Tonglen, giving and taking. On your in-breath, you're connecting with compassion. On your out-breath, connecting with love. Every cycle of breath, weakening the self-cherishing thought, strengthening bodhicitta. And verse 8. Also, I do not defile all these practices with the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. And by knowing all phenomena to be illusory, without trusting in them, I am freed from bondage. The blissful white nectar purifies all obscurations, especially the self-cherishing thought that causes the 8 worldly concerns and the ignorance that prevents you from perceiving all phenomena as illusory, and brings all realizations, especially the wisdom realizing emptiness, which perceives all phenomena as illusory, and by which you are released from the bondage of attachment. And so let yourself remember these 8 worldly concerns, these pairs of attachment and aversion, neurotic hope and fear, all day, every day, thinking too much, not enough, too much, not enough. These are superstitions. May we see them as superstitions. May we free ourselves from bondage and attachment. Freeing ourselves from that mind that chases, that is so hungry, that gets needy, that has immature hope. Freeing ourselves from that mind that has aversion, repulsion, that pushes away, that has immature fear. May we be free. And we request, Great Compassionate One, please extend your holy hand and lead me and all other sentient beings to your blissful pure realm after this life. Be our virtuous friend in all our lives and quickly lead us to Buddhahood. And think that Guru Chenrezig accepts your request and innumerable nectar beams flow into your body. All your negative karmas, obscurations, diseases, and spirit harms are purified. Your body becomes as clear as crystal. And Guru Chenrezig then melts into light and absorbs into you. Your body, speech, and mind become inseparably one with Guru Chenrezig's holy body, holy speech, and holy mind. And then connect with Chenrezig once again, now sending out to all sentient beings this compassionate wisdom. Adding the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om 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 Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. And think, whatever suffering transmigratory beings experience, may it all ripen on me. Whatever happiness and virtue I accumulate, may it all ripen on others. May I never be discouraged, even for a moment, from practicing the deeds of the Bodhisattvas for the sake of others, by completely renouncing anything done for my own sake, and by enacting the holy deeds of the kind founder, Shakyamuni Buddha. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by the numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from this own side, achieve the state of great compassion and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to the state of great compassionate one who is completely empty of existing from its own side. By myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. Jantu Sencho Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyamba Me Payang, Gone Gondu Pawa Sho, Toni Dawa Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchi, Ke Panyamba Me Payang, Gone Gondu Pawa Sho. Okay. Okay, thanks everyone. So that practice ever flow